why are so many, and many is underlined like 17 times, why are so many people apparently refusing to face that this is a fascist regime? And how do we change that before it is too late? And the second one that came through text is, what will it take, underlined, to convince normal Americans that active resistance is the best way to stop this regime?
I'll just make a very brief response, which just reiterates something that I said in my remarks. But I remember being told by someone 7 days, I think, after Trump was elected, that he had a friend who was involved in the hedge fund world. And their hedge fund had made over $150 million on the tailwind of that election. So why are so many people not looking at the dangers? Because a lot of people are willing to overlook the damage to these very vulnerable populations that's happening today and rake in the money. And there are a lot of people, I am sure, in this town who, whatever they voted in the election, people on Wall Street, people in the real estate industry, who woke up the next morning and thought, well, what exactly were we voting against here? This man is going to cut these regulations. He is an entirely pro-business candidate. Maybe we just ride along for a while and get what we can. And I think, unfortunately, that is really an unbelievably powerful force against recognizing the egregious violations of human rights, etc., that he's responsible for.
Sometimes I feel that, especially because I move between worlds, I move between that world on the street with the day labor, and then sometimes I might be with those people that you're talking about, that there's these parallel universes that we're in right now. We always have been, but it's more drastic now than ever. And it's very easy for some people to just continue myopically in that parallel universe and not look, at that day laborer, or dismiss him as lazy or something, or accept, the bad criminalization stereotypes that are thrown out in the media, and just continue and do those things that we're supposed to do every day. And like you say, just overlook, and think it's not going to knock at my door. But guess what? It will.
Well, why don't people want to accept it as the word fascism? I think one problem is that we're so depoliticized in this country. We know so little about history. People don't even know what fascism is. When I go out and I refer to Trump as that, one of the retorts I'll get from the other side is, oh, well, that just means you don't like him. Fascism is just what you call someone you don't like. There's this sense of some sort of general negativity. So people, and it's a similar, I think, struggle you see in this country when you try to talk about class issues, where most Americans don't have the faintest idea of what classes are and how they work, and they think you're talking a foreign language. Because, again, we're depoliticized in this country, and we don't understand the history of these things. So that's part of it. I think the other is a fear of what comes next, right? Because when you say Trump is a fascist, that creates an incredible moral, ethical call on you to do something about it, right? If I say, I don't like Obama, he's a neoliberal, that doesn't necessarily create a kind of moral calling on me that happens when I say Trump is a fascist. You can't say that and then walk away and get coffee. It requires a response. And I know for my group, Center for University, We're an environmental group. We mostly work on endangered species, and when we decided after the election and before the inauguration that this is happening, this is a fascist, we had to step back and say, what does that mean for us? What do we have to do? And so we did something we've never done before. We put on a 16-city Earth to Trump resistance roadshow and traveled the country from the West Coast to the inauguration, bringing people there to protest. And in our roadshow, I mean, we didn't call it the Environmental Resistance Roadshow, right? It was the Earth to Trump show. We had Muslim speakers, we had immigrant speakers, we had people talking about Latino rights, workers' rights, gay rights, we had Planned Parenthood, because one of the things that happens if you say fascism is here is you immediately are forced to think, oh, I can't just work in the box I was working in before. Because fascism is way bigger than that. I gotta work with everybody, right? Because a fascist leader doesn't just pick out this or that to fight. They declare war on everybody. And so I gotta work with everybody. So it requires, and I'll say this, some of my colleagues in the environmental group are afraid of exactly that, and don't want to use that term, don't want to feel that call, don't want to get out of their comfort zone and do all this, and they're kind of hoping it will go away. Kind of hoping it will go away. So I think that's a big impetus to people.
Well, I agree with a lot of what people said. There's one question of how do we take it on, and the other hand, why do people think this? Why are people not confronting that as fascism? Well, even today's New York Times, you can see a picture with the no sign. We've gotten the word out, but we've barely begun. People need to be confronted and have that moral challenge put in front of them. But I think, just to be quick about this, I think there's a few reasons why people don't immediately react. One is this, people have been depoliticized over decades now to think only about themselves. At the same time, there's been a whole thing of don't upset anybody. Just say something to get along and don't actually challenge anybody. I think in this country, too many people do not know the lives, as both of you brought out, of the immigrants, don't know the lives of the youth in the inner city. That's something that has to be brought to them, okay? I think that people broadly don't understand, or that people have been brought up we're in a church, been brought up in the church of the democracy of America is infinitely perfectible, and it is the best system and even the only system. Many of them never actually had any experience with or thought about different ways society could be organized, including that fascism, while still, as I said before, a capitalist imperialist system, it's going to be a qualitative difference. They don't know about this. They need to be told this. They need to learn about this. And I think people have a question of America first while that is the watchword of the Trump movement, I think all too many progressive people do not understand what America does around the world and go with it. It was shameful what's happened in the last 2 weeks, and there weren't more people in the street when they dropped that largest of non-nuclear weapons. This should have filled Times Square. See, I just think this is a big problem that we face as a movement. Thank you for your service. You can't get on a goddamn airplane without thanking them for their service. So what were they doing in the service? First of all, it's the way the volunteer army works is fucked up. But you got a lot of people in there doing a lot of damage to a lot of people who become these refugees and immigrants. Thank you for your service. We got to get to a place where people stand up against that. And I think to get to the second part of the question, how do we get people to act and to stand up against fascism? I think we've got to go shock them. We've got to shock their conscience. We're just sitting across the street from the Gay and Lesbian Center, where when the disease of AIDS was ravaging New York, but nobody would speak the name, and there was just the Gay Men's Health Crisis Center. It was in that center that Larry Kramer went in there as one of the leading members of it, and then took it out, actually, on his own community and said, you people are wanting to peacefully die. This is a plague. We have to act against it. And he got very sharp with the people in that movement. And he led a movement that got out in the streets in very confrontational ways that dramatized the situation of why so many were dying and why the medications were withheld. And we have to do the same thing about the scourge and the illness of fascism and the Donald Trump and Mike Pence regime. We have to go out there and wake people up. We have to think of the kinds of actions that will dramatize what is to come. And we have to challenge people. And at the same time, as Eva said, we should unite with every protest that's going on. We should make it easy for people to become a part of the organization. If you hate this regime, you can be a part of it. There's something for everyone to do. But when you're talking about millions of people getting active, we're going to have to shake things up. I don't think we should wait until there's some kind of precipitous action, as George was talking about the Reichstag fire, to wake people up. Because it could be, and most likely will be, not a good outcome from that if we haven't built the basis for people to understand what this country is about and is doing now under the leadership of this regime. So that's what I think about this, and I think it's very good that you guys hit the road like that, but we need to see that multiply 1,000 times to the point where that becomes what's going on in the country, and that's what they have to respond to.
Thank you for that. And I just want to read something very, very quick that was, again, from Zweig's autobiography about his experience of watching the first refugees from Nazi Germany in 1933 coming over the mountains to Salzburg. He said, starved, shabby, agitated, they were the leaders in the panicked flight from inhumanity, which was to spread over the whole earth. But even then, I did not suspect, when I looked at those fugitives, that I ought to perceive in those pale faces, as in a mirror, my own life, and that we all would become victims of the lust for power of this one man.